Excuse me, what a weird time to burp. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Midweek Gaming. I'm Nick over the comms, of course, Justin. You'll forgive me if I sound a bit more monotone. You're probably not showing the recording, but it's actually like 2:41 where I am. But since we're late with this video, like we're not even in the week anymore, I gotta get this out sooner rather than later. So, yeah. So forgive me if I sound more monotone. I just kind of have to not make sure I wake up my neighbors or my roommates. So. University residence, am I right? Anyways, so this week we'll be talking about Warframe and Soulframe as well. Kind of a bit of a mixed news this week because I think on Friday or Thursday, I can't remember which, there was two dev streams actually back to back from DE. The first one was about Soulframe, the titular new game that DE is developing, and of course the 182nd dev stream for Warframe. So, yeah, I thought we'd split the difference and kind of cover both newses because I feel like where DE's concerned, it's kind of hard to talk about one without talking about the other, considering they've. There's just such an amalgam when it comes to these two games. You know, the same people are basically working on the same things. It's like the people who talk Soulframe are also probably sitting in the same meetings where Warframe is being discussed and developed. So it just feels right to talk about them in the same breath. So let's split the news and talk. Starting off with Soulframe. Let me just say, for those who don't know, Soulframe is actually in its pre-alpha stage at the moment, but the preludes, as they're calling them, which is basically kind of closed alpha testing, is going on. Now, through a stroke of fate, I actually managed to get into these alpha testings and have actually been playing the game. It's not bad. Now, compared to what we talked about last time Soulframe was brought up on the channel, where, you know, a lot of floaty combat and stuff like that, it's very much been ironed out. And it feels a lot better to play, honestly, in terms of combat. So it's definitely improving. It's 100% improving. In the dev stream, they talked about, you know, a bunch of changes they're going to make. It looks like they're changing up the UI, which is nice because I literally was playing the game literally like yesterday or the day before that, and I'm like, you know, the HP bar for enemies is a bit hard to read at times. So it's good to see they're changing that up, and they're changing up a few things of how powers work. They're no longer making it so you have to kill the enemy dogs. They just kind of run away, and they'll run away for now. But you can take the helmet off of them and kind of free them, make them free. So that's a nice thing. But yeah, it's interesting because where Soulframe is concerned, because like I said, it's in such a pre-alpha stage at the moment that it's hard to say where there's hard to say like the news to talk about because like I said, there's really just not much to talk about at the moment. Uh, Interestingly enough, Steve, who's the CEO of DE and also the head of the Soulframe project at this point, former head of Warframe before he turned it over to Rebecca, but more on that side of the conversation later, actually was in Japan alongside the rest of the DE staff. I think it was, oh my god, what's the big games convention in Japan? Oh, my brain is drawing a blank here. I'm pretty sure you don't remember, Justin. Dang it. Everything in my power is off at the moment, so I can't look it up. I want to say Gamescom. Let's just go with Gamescom. I'm probably wrong, but let's just say it's Gamescom. But anyways, they're in Gamescom. Again, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, because that's just the name that's coming to my mind at the moment. And, you know, they were showing off Soulframe and Warframe and stuff like that. And he actually mentioned, Steve, that, interestingly enough, he wasn't himself sure if he could mention this, and I'm not sure if I should mention it by re-saying it, because he wasn't even sure if he should bring it up. But apparently, among all the people they met at the Gamescom, which again is in Japan, so you got a lot of Eastern fans and Eastern companies from the Far East talking as well. Steve was approached by the head of MiHoYo, actually, the CEO of MiHoYo. You know, the Genshin Impact guys. And supposedly the CEO said, you know, what is Soulframe? And it's interesting to see that, you know, some other big players in the space are kind of interested in the game as well. It makes sense because Soulframe, from what it kind of is, kind of feels like more of a realistic, more foresty set for Genshin in a way. Like, in how the game plays in terms of its open world, I can kind of see why they would show an interest in the project because, like, is this kind of similar to what we're doing? Like, what is this? So he kind of said, it's kind of an he. Interestingly enough, he said that he doesn't like to use the term open world, and the team doesn't where Soulframe is concerned because it's got like some negative connotations to it, which, considering what Ubisoft does with open worlds, I can't exactly say they're wrong. Um, but it is kind of that open world-esque, kind of game, kind of a looter slasher, I think he called it. So it's interesting. But yeah, supposedly another big Prelude 7 or version 7 of the Preludes or whatever is coming up next week. So we'll certainly see, or at least if you're in the Preludes like myself, you will see kind of more about what's being worked on and kind of implemented. Interestingly enough, I'll kind of close up the Soulframe discussion by saying one thing, and that is that all the kind of complaints from TennoCon have certainly been like they've been addressed and stuff like that. And he actually mentioned, Steve, that one of the best, like one of the worst actually things that he thinks DE could do as a studio is kind of go silent for like a very long time when it comes to development. And that's why they're very open with how they develop Warframe, how they develop Soulframe. It's a very kind of watch the process kind of situation. So it is interesting to kind of know that there is, you know, talk about how everything is going on and that they are actually listening, which is more than we can say for certain studios these days who claim to be listening and you really don't see any evidence to that.
And then
So
you find the opposite like a couple months down the road.
pretty much. So it is good to see like the kind of let's see the process and see how it turns out kind of thing. Oh, actually, before I close it off, I one final thing. One thing they did say at TennoCon is that they were hoping to get the open beta or open preludes available by the end of this year, which for those who don't know was kind of, as I said before, kind of how preludes is working is that you sign up for preludes and that through random draw, I think there's like 2,000 they're doing a week, you might get the chance to get into preludes. I myself was lucky because I was at TennoCon this year, and they basically said everyone in the room who's at TennoCon and showed up live will actually get into preludes. They'll send out the keys, which is nice because I'd been waiting for like 2 years to get in, so I was guaranteed. But they were planning to open it up to everyone, so you can just get into the game and not have to wait in queue. But they said that they won't be able to do that this year, and they're pushing it back. At least that thing, because the game's just not in the state they want it to be. They said. Plus, they've also said, with the release of 1999 from Warframe, that they're having to move around resources in the studio, and since 1999 is such a big push for DE out the door, they've got to prioritize that versus kind of Soulframe, which is, if you really wanted to be specific about it, is kind of more of an incubator project, really. So it's kind of like put your men where the money is kind of thing. Which, on that note, let's go over to Warframe. So as mentioned, the Warframe 1999 update is coming out this year. And as a result, Soulframe is having to push back its open state and kind of development somewhat to accommodate that. Like I said earlier in the show, the people who discuss and build Warframe are in the same room, talking with the same people who make Soulframe. I mean, Steve, for pity's sake, who is the CEO of the studio and head of Soulframe, was also the ex-head of Warframe, is on both of the dev streams, which is interesting. Like, again, I talk him up quite a bit because it's just easy to do, but not to praise him more than he deserves, but I just find it hilarious that you actually see a CEO, nowadays anyway, sitting in the dev chair, or sitting in a dev stream and talking. He wasn't always CEO, but it's nice to see the entire team, including, Scott, Jeff, Rebecca, all the big heads of DE sitting in a dev stream and actually just talking.
Yes.
Excuse me, I take a drink. Which, when it comes to devs, like, it might just sidetrack for a little bit. The the thing I often find interesting with dev streams is that they're very scripted. Like everything is pre-rehearsed, everything is pre-said, every question that is posed is, already been talked about with HR and cleared by legal and given an official boilerplate answer. It's like everything is so pre-rehearsed that when companies have their kind of like dev marketing whatever they're called these days. I don't know. It just doesn't feel genuine.
We don't want to fight you
Versus
later,
when
Team
DE
Aramis.
tends to
Call
do it,
them off.
like
I'm not the
they
one
do
who
it
needed
live,
the
even on
rescue.
TennoCon for
Once
pity's sake, and
he
I've seen them do it,
finds
and I've met all these people at these conventions. They're very down to earth people, and it is funny to actually have responses from devs that are genuine. Which, on the topic of genuine, one of the things revealed with the Warframe is that the next Prime, interestingly enough, is going to be Zaku, the broken Warframe. Which is, it's interesting. I'm not a Zaku player, I don't have the Zaku Warframe. I was personally still crossing my fingers and praying for Caliban because I want the Caliban Prime, but since he just recently got reworked, I'll let it slide. I'm not gonna lie though, the kind of stuff that they're having out looks really good. Like the operator skin that they have for for the Zaku set that's coming out with the Prime Access looks really, really good, I'm not gonna lie. One of the things that was mentioned actually during the dev stream is that, interestingly enough, well, on an unfortunate note, one of the kind of background members of the development team, well, former development team, Michael Brennan, actually passed away, I think recently, like when they were at Gamescom in Tokyo. So he was brought up on the dev stream and kind of his work, which was really interesting. He was actually one of the original kind of members of the DE team or Warframe team back when it was still in its incubation phase. And, you know, he did a lot of stuff for it and a lot of concept stuff. And, you know, eventually he did leave DE to do his own kind of thing. But interestingly enough, they did actually say that they kind of still worked with him to some degree. Like whenever they would have an idea, they would bounce it off him and he would say yes or no or, you know, kind of give his input. In fact, he even had kind of an input in Soulframe as well. So it's unfortunate to see that, you know, a guy who had such kind of concepts in Warframe, kind of a hand in the game, even after his departure from the studio is gone, is unfortunate. In fact, it was revealed that on the topic of 1999, the new Lich system we're getting is the kind of boy band infested liches, which never not gonna feel weird to say, not gonna lie, was I think actually accredited to being his idea. So despite leaving the studio several years ago, he's still had or had a hand in content all the way up until like the most recent stuff with 1999. So it's unfortunate to hear his passing, and I hope that we still get or this. I hope that everything is good with his family and that you know he is accredited and remembered. They say in the dev stream that they're going to put some kind of memorial to him in 1999 because, like many things with the game, he worked on that. So we'll see how that kind of comes in. Speaking of, they kind of also showed off in the dev stream of 1999 some of the, I suppose you could call it Gemini Warframes, which I say Gemini Warframes, but in reality they're more kind of skins. See, the shtick is that there's basically an equivalent Warframe variant that's kind of human-esque, kind of akin to Umbra and Excalibur in the second, not second dream, the Sacrifice in 1999. So, you know, there's oh my god, I can't remember all their names now, but basically Arthur is kind of a human version of Excalibur, and Aoi is the human version of Mag, and there's a bunch of other characters whose names I cannot remember at the top of the moment. But what's interesting is that they're going to be brought in as kind of like a fully voiced version of the skin for a Warframe that you can kind of flop back and forth between. And so they kind of showed off the transition between those two kind of states. There's a whole fully voiced skin, which is kind of interesting. So it's not just like a cosmetic thing. You also get like an entire suite of dialogue alongside it, which is interesting.
So much has happened. I can't believe
In
how
terms of
long.
cosmetics, it certainly seems like an
We couldn't leave
interesting, if not
salvage a small section of the
semi-ambitious thing
ship
to
to
do.
Europa. We couldn't leave poor Failsafe alone out there
So
again.
I guess I'm all for
We
it to some
must find a
degree.
way
We'll
out of the
see.
last city for now.
And honestly, I usually don't find myself sitting
Welcome to
here
my tonic
uh,
shop.
complementing or encouraging monetization schemes. But as you kind of gathered throughout probably the course of this episode of the show, I actually am pretty on board with DE as a studio. Like I was generally kind of rehearsing the script in my head, or the kind of what I would say on this episode before the show, and kind of it always kind of came back to the idea that like I know where the money's going when I put money into the studio. We talk about Bungie, and I know this is a weird shift, but follow me here. We talk about Bungie a lot on this show to some degree as well, and I think they're a good paradigm. In fact, that's why Justin's playing Bungie's Destiny right now. Not just because he doesn't have either Warframe or Soulframe. Nope, nope. Not just because of that, but
Don't worry about
also
it.
because also because they're a very good paradigm against Warframe.
In what
Because
ways?
Destiny,
They're pretty similar in a lot of regards.
Don't let him know that I'm
the franchises both literally started, I think, the same year. Destiny 1, I think, released
Yeah.
2014, and I think Warframe officially also released in 2014. So they've always kind of been competitors to a certain degree. They've been very much in different niches, but they very much kind of fight for the same kind of player, so to speak, I think. Or even if they don't, it's kind of like they've always been in competition.
Yeah.
And you can kind of sidestep the whole Warframe might be winning right now because of the messing up of Bungie at the current moment, but we'll just put that aside for the sake of discussion.
Tick for tack.
Yeah. But I think that's kind of why, like I said, I kind of support the development of DE and Warframe and Soulframe and stuff like that, compared to something like Bungie, where it's like, I think the most recent good example of this is like we learned the CEO of Bungie spends ungodly amounts of money every few months or month or so on like a really expensive used car. And, I'm not going to sit here and say he can't do that. I'm a business management student. He may have other investments. And so, as a person in my kind of education, I myself am not exactly one to shame him. But, you kind of have to sit there and also step back and say, regardless of whether he has other investments or whether he can make that kind of money, it's like with all the stuff revolving around Bungie at the time and just, how it came off, it just isn't a good look. And so you have these moments where you put all the money in Bungie and you sit there, and a lot of people might sit there and go, where is this money actually going, though? Another good example is like the mobile game. Recently, or the last few weeks, a trailer just dropped for the Bungie or Destiny mobile game. And some of the jokes I saw in the comment section there were like, these are all really great ideas for Destiny as a main game proper. And some people were even joking, it's like, well, now we know where all the money went. It's like you don't know where it is, and if you do, you might not support where the money for the game or where what you're putting into the game is actually supporting. Are you supporting the developers? Are you supporting the development of this game, or are you supporting a CEO's car collection addiction or some crazy mobile game which may or may not be a success? You don't know. And I think that's just kind of one of the many things where it's like I'm arguably a lot less frugal when it comes to approaching Warframe and their monetization scheme than I am for something like Bungie, where I am actively frugal when it comes to things. Like I think the only times I've ever spent silver in their like Eververse stores like for direct charity things, and that's it. Versus something like DE, where I genuinely don't care. Yeah, I don't spend money there pretty much either, but it's like I'm not really sitting there going, okay, if I do, how can I stretch the dollar, so to speak. Like I genuinely don't care because I know where this is pretty much going to go. It's going to go into Soulframe, it's going to go into Warframe, it's going to go into supporting the company which does good work. Versus, like I said, with Bungie is a good analog here, I don't know where that money's going. Could be to Bungie, could be to Destiny, could be to a CEO's car collection. It could be to a mobile game, which I genuinely don't know if will even work. It's kind of that transparency or perceived transparency, which I think is far better. And so if you're sitting there going, why the hell is he going on about a freaking monetization scheme? There's kind of my long answer to the question. But anyways, let's see. What else am I gonna cover here? We don't do scripts on this show, so you'll forgive me if I have to sit here for a moment and just rehearse my notes in my head and see what I have and haven't covered. Cover 1999, cover the Soulframe stuff, cover the Zaku Prime. Oh yes, they're also reworking Trinity as kind of another follow-up, because one of the characters in the 1999 cast is going to be a doctor who is in a Trinity Warframe, so Trinity will be receiving these Gemini skins, and since she herself is a pretty old Warframe, they're kind of touching up her abilities to kind of work in the modern sandbox. So there's a whole host of changes they brought in, or kind of are showing off in the dev stream to her changes. I won't go over them too much myself, or if at all here, because frankly I'm not a Trinity player, so I don't know her abilities already that well, so I really wouldn't be able to do her justice if I kind of tried to describe the better, effects of the new stuff, because I don't even know how effective the old stuff is. But, you can just go look for it yourself if you're interested. By the by, both of these dev streams that I'm talking about link in the description below, so go check them out. So, yeah. All in all, though, things are looking pretty decent as far as things are going. As far as an actual release date for 1999, to be determined. They're still sticking with their TennoCon promise of putting it out winter of this year. So, at least by the end of December this year. But beyond that, we don't actually have a release date. It sounds like, judging by, them moving resources around in the Soulframe team and, just how ambitious this particular expansion is, it seems that it's proving to be more challenging to develop than they thought it would. And or they just want to make sure they get it right. Because one thing I will criticize about DE is that they have a habit of saying they will deliver X, and sure, they mightn't deliver X. It might not just work properly. I have to go no further than to point out Day 1 Railjack to let all the veterans know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, just look up Day 1 Railjack bugs. You'll see.
You'll know.
You will know. So, yeah, they could just be making sure they want to get this massive update right, kind of like what they did for the new war, because, it's kind of like a massive update for them that they want to get right, so it makes sense. So, to be determined the official release date window thing. Oh yeah, and before people ask, because I myself am curious, so somebody's probably going to ask, no, they have not talked about Warframe on the flippin' Samsung or Galaxy or regular phone stores. We only have Warframe so far on the iOS store, which I'm not angry, you're angry. But we'll get there. I mean, let's be frank, this game plays on pretty much everything, including the smart fridge at this point, so we'll get there eventually. But anyways, so yeah, that's kind of the nuts and bolts and kind of long short version of both the Soulframe and the Warframe dev stream. Again, I'm abbreviating quite a bit here, but these are both each an hour-long dev stream, so if I sat here and talked about everything they talked about, we would probably be sitting here for more than, well, my clock says at least 23 minutes, so I'm going to stop talking now before we get into 30 minutes. So, yeah.
We'll call it there.
We'll call it there. Any closing thoughts, Justin?
No.
Well then. So yeah, that's the how-to-dos on Warframe and Soulframe, and if you're in the Soulframe preludes, let us know how you're doing in the comments section. What do you think is good? What do you think's bad? Let us know. I'm genuinely curious. Crafting's a bit of a pain in the neck to find. I literally had to Google search how to find it, so... Steve and
Pain
Jeff
with some
and Scott, did you
games
ever hear
tend
this?
to lead you down that route.
Scott, Steve, Jeff, guys, if you hear this, please make that quest more easy to find. I didn't even know there was well, I knew there was crafting. I just had to look high and low for the darn thing, and maybe a Discord or not Discord, a page on Reddit. So fix it, please. Thank you. Anyways, that's all for this week's video, everyone. Have a good week, have a good night, and we might do another video Friday to make up for the fact we didn't do one last week, technically. So, have a good one, everyone.